This episode of Super Boothers is brought to you by the Photo Booth Expo in Las Vegas this coming March 12th to March 14th, 2018 at the Westgate Hotel and Casino. Visit photoboothexpo.com and use promo code SUPERB2018 for a key pass or SUPERB2018E for an exhibits only pass. See you there.
Hello and welcome to Super Boothers. My name is Ryan.
And I'm Ismail, and I am excited today to hear about a topic that Ryan is very passionate about for the second time.
So, a little backstory. We recorded this episode, and I may have had a problem with my audio, and there may have been a very loud echo, and this might be the second time we're recording this.
But it's okay. We are so committed to providing value to our listeners that we will jump through the fire again.
Well, I have
because of Ryan. It was his fault.
I need to apologize to Ismail because him and I were texting today, and I may have given him a little Ryan smackdown, and it bit me in the ass because my audio that we recorded was horrible. So we have to re-record it again. So this is me eating crow.
It's just like me and my wife. You know, I'm always right. And, and when the time comes that it's proven that I'm right, I take the high road. Let the record show that I took the high road and I didn't say anything.
Well, this crow is delicious. Anyways, today we're going to talk about chargebacks. And the reason why is just because one of my friends, she's a florist, had a very nasty chargeback and a horrible issue with a client.
So Ryan, before we start talking about chargebacks, would you mind explaining to people that don't know what it is? What exactly is it? Why does it come up? And why is it bad?
So a chargeback is whenever a customer disputes a charge on their credit card. This is usually because they're pissed off for one reason or another. There are times where I've had chargebacks where a client will say that they didn't receive, the product that they thought they were getting. This is really important to be sure to document everything that happens with your event. What will happen is the issuing bank, which is their bank, will send a transaction to the acquiring bank, which is your merchant services account. And depending on your level and your volume with how much money you run through that processor will determine what they do. Whenever a chargeback happens, do not refund the customer on your own. Generally, they will, and again, depends on their card or which brand they're using. Sometimes that money is given to them immediately. Sometimes it's just being held. So it's really important. Don't refund the customer on your own. Once the chargeback is done, the damage is done, and now you just handle it through the credit card company.
So generally speaking, I guess because it's from an unsatisfied customer, you know in advance that a chargeback is coming, or at least you have a very strong hint of it, right?
9 times out of 10, yes. There are very few times where you will get it kind of out of the blue. There is something now called friendly fraud. I think I've had this happen to me maybe once or twice. It's when customers purchase the products with the intent of initiating a chargeback just to get free stuff. There are times where you will have customers that will most definitely overspend, on their event and try to recoup some of the money. And you can kind of tell whenever these are going to come because they will nickel and dime the bill. They'll say, well, you didn't do this, or you were late, or whatever the case may be. Chargebacks aren't good just because A, it creates a lot of paperwork, and B, it can cost you a lot of money and time. Chargeback fees can range anywhere from $20 to $100 depending on the card brand.
So you're saying in addition to having to refund the customer, there's an additional penalty that you'd have to pay if you lose the debate about the chargeback?
Absolutely. And let's say that chargeback throws your account into the negative, you're paying those overdraft fees as well.
This is something that I've heard a lot of people really complain about, is something with PayPal, right? Where if you receive a chargeback, there may be other penalties that these companies impose on you, like locking your account. So that's why a lot of people that use PayPal advise sweeping your cash out of there like daily, because if anything happens, they can actually lock the entire balance of funds in there. So it's not just about refunding the customer. There are other penalties that can come into play in relation to a chargeback.
A lot of times they will hold money. So for example, like I think if, depending on like how many chargebacks you have, the credit card company can say, if you charge the card on a Monday, you won't get it until the following Monday, or, 14 days or 30 days. I don't think I've seen it go further out than 90, but at any rate, this is something that is going to happen whenever you work with the public.
And it's amazing that you were commenting before that some people, the friendly fraud thing where they purposefully go out and knowingly get stuff and plan about doing chargebacks. So it's hard to believe, but there are actually people out there that do this like daily, and maybe some of them earn a living that way, where they resell the products they get fraudulently. So I think it's something you have to be vigilant about. I think, Ryan, you combat a lot of this with the documentation. Can you talk a little bit about what you do to track everything so that if anything does happen, it's an easy case for you to win?
So with documenting, you're going to have a couple of things that you can do to prevent this. One of the things is making sure that your payments are taken securely online or they're swiped. You will have, if you take credit cards over the phone, it's fine. You just need to make sure to follow up with it with a credit card authorization. A credit card not present is a valid form of chargeback. So if you didn't actually swipe the card and you took a card over the phone but don't have a written authorization, you absolutely are opening yourself up to having that being charged back.
So you're saying in that case you would lose the case regardless of all the other supporting documents that you have?
No, that would be up to them. But I mean, the more supporting documents you have, the better. So whenever you get a chargeback, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a letter, you're going to get an email. 9 times out of 10, this day and age, you're going to get an email.
And who does that come from?
That comes from your merchant services. So I have accounts with Square, I have accounts with Braintree, I have accounts with Stripe, I have accounts with PayPal. I've worked with them all. I have been in business 14 years. I've been doing photo booths in this incarnation for about 4 years. I have not ever lost a chargeback in the last 4 years.
Don't mess with Ryan.
I've had a couple, and that's only because I've been there, I've done that, I've dealt with it. I know what these people need, that they look out for. So you're going to get that email, and it's going to say this particular client is, refusing this charge on this date, and it's going to list the reason. So pay attention to the reason, because that's what you need to address. If, for example, that a couple of reasons are, they didn't get the product, meaning you didn't deliver it. The products and services weren't as described, or they didn't receive everything, or parts were missing. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to have respond a little bit with your little essay, and then always attach your signed contract, attach your signed credit card authorization if you have it. You need to, whenever you have attendants delivering it, there are times where the attendant can ask the customer to sign the little order form saying that they received it. This is also used to say, hey, listen, we deliver this. I just talked about this in the last episode, is an event report. It is where your attendant fills out a little form at the end of each event saying, hey, this is what happened. They always include photos of the event. I always you can only do text whenever you respond to these things. Sometimes you can do uploads. I like to put the photos into Dropbox and then copy the link and put it into that little essay. And then I had one issue with a client that said, oh, well, you were late. And I mean, she wasn't even there. She was getting married at the time. She didn't know that we were there an hour and a half before. There are times where your client is just really misinformed. There are times where your client will be pissed off and could very well pull the trigger without talking to you first. And that is very common as well. It just depends on the type of consumer they are. In that instance, I use When I Work, and that is able to GPS locate the attendant where they clocked in and clocked out of. So I can see that he clocked in an hour and a half prior to at the event, and then I always included that documentation with it. So this is the thing, is with my volume, I do a decent amount every year. There's no way I can keep track of all this stuff. So luckily my software keeps track of all this stuff for me. So whenever I get a chargeback, type in the client name and being able to give the credit card company all the documentation they need.
Now, I can't help but think of the perspective of Billy the Boother, that's listening to the show, and he's hearing about all these apps and all these things that you're using to track it and all these clauses that you have. And I'd imagine that it's the minority of cases that there's an issue. What do you tell people that, think, what, this happens 1 in a million. It's not worth the effort to implement all these systems?
This is the thing, is that you are not going to scale the way you want to if you don't have these systems in place prior to. By the time you already get busy, it's too late. You're already behind the curve, and you need to play a little bit of catch up. That's the thing is here. A lot of people will blame the merchant account. there are a lot of people that blame PayPal for their problems. That's really just not the case. You're going to have the liability whenever you take credit cards, period. I, however, do not take checks. I am very anti-check. I am very all digital.
But what about saving the 2% processing fee, Ryan? That adds up to like $80.
I could give a shit. I really could. I really could. That's the thing is I've had more problems with checks than anything else. I think a couple days ago, I just saw someone on Photo Booth Network saying that they had an issue with, a check bouncing and it's after the fact. And, what can you do? There are very few things that you can do whenever you have a bad check. There are more things that you can do that you can be proactive about with a credit card. I do not take checks, period. There are times where a customer will come to me and say, listen, can we write you a check? You'll have it in 2 weeks. I'm so sorry. No. Whenever they say, well, how come you don't take checks? I have it listed that I will take a check. If you have a corporate account, I give them a form to fill out to become a corporate account, and there's a minimum opening of $5,000, an opening order, and then I'll take a check from you.
Yeah, I think it's important to always measure all variables involved, right? So it's not just about, I have to pay an extra 2% or 2.9% to use the credit card. It's the other benefits that it brings you in terms of security, in terms of things being tracked, and in terms of saving time, not having to get checks in the mail or going to the bank and depositing them, or you can do mobile deposit now, but still, it saves you the time and hassle of tracking all that. So there's value to that.
That's a thing with the speed at which I book things because I am so high volume. It's very important that I'm not going to wait around for a check that may never come. There are times where, and I have it clearly listed on all my booking information, your date is not confirmed until we have money on it.
And I think there's also statistics out there that prove if you start accepting credit cards, you make 20% or more in revenue.
Yeah, I think it's like 24%. Yeah, there's a 24% increase.
To more clients, because not everyone has, $1,000 laying around to just pay for a booth, and they have to use a credit card to be able to do that.
That's the thing is, this also brings up another issue with credit cards is there are times where people will charge an American Express fee. That is against your terms with American Express. That means that you are discriminating against American Express for your customer to use.
So Ryan, are you telling people that they should actually read the agreements and terms of things they use? What?
Occasionally, I think it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I remember when I was buying a car recently, and the guy handed me the contract, and I was actually reading it. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm reading the contract that you have to sign." Oh, no one reads it. It doesn't matter that no one reads it. You have to be different. You have to be above the fray if you are a super boother and read the terms and conditions of what you use. The other thing I was curious about is, in line with the previous question, is there ever a time where it's not worth arguing a chargeback? Like, what if it's a small event and it's only, I don't know, a couple $100, and it may not be worth the time arguing it? What do you do about those events?
There are times where if you're going to have a client that's going to that's another thing. American Express just released a thing where anything under $25, like if a client disputes something under $25, they don't care. They're just going to eat it. And that just got changed, I think, within the last couple of months. However, most of us deal with numbers larger than that. I'm always going to respond to anything that I get, if it's a chargeback, no matter what, because that is your relationship with your merchant account. The more chargebacks you have, obviously, the more damaging it is to your account. I don't want any of that.
What about instances where, a chargeback is a result of a dissatisfied customer, right? So not only do you have to deal with a chargeback, oftentimes they go on Yelp or whatever other platform and start leaving a lot of negative reviews. I assume that the documentation that you collect to fight chargebacks can also help you in fighting against those reviews.
So let me tell you a little story. My friend that just had this issue with her bride, she was delivering flowers, and with that, I guess the bride she was delivering flowers. She went up to the room. They were still getting ready. She said, "What do you think?" She said, "Oh, it's all gorgeous, great, fantastic. I'm going to head down to the reception, finish everything there. I'll take everything from the ceremony and move it. All good to go." And this was a tiny, tiny, tiny wedding. This was no more than $1,500 in flowers, which in flower world is next to nothing. The Tuesday after, she gets an email saying how disappointed she was that this person didn't have a boutonniere, that she was running late. And she's like, where is all this coming from? So whenever you get that initial client email, to you that they're dissatisfied, you really need to address all of the issues that they're talking about. She was very forthright in giving her documentation as to say, listen, this is what I was doing. She's like, I don't understand how I could be late when you were still in your robe whenever I was delivering your bouquets, boutonnieres, and corsages. So anyways, this is also really important to be in touch with the vendors that you're also working with. She needed to kind of prove that she wasn't running late and that this person did in fact have a boutonniere before the ceremony. She calls the venue and says, listen, this is a strange request. Do you think you could pull the footage from this event in this particular location? And he goes, why do you ask? And, she said, well, I'm having an issue with this client, da 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 da. He goes, oh, this client is coming in today to meet with our GM. Apparently what happened was she was disputing a large part of her alcohol bill, saying that they didn't drink that much, went into this whole spiel. Come to find out, the video cameras proved that guests were stealing bottles of wine and taking it to their room. So for the customer to always be right is statistically impossible.
At least they were keeping it classy.
Kind of. I'm pretty sure that's not all they took. However, and then the bride changed her tone immediately. The problem is this continued on. I mean, this is just like a nightmare client to have. She ended up writing very disparaging reviews on The Knot and Wedding Wire on stuff that really isn't true. And that's the thing is, whenever you have this documentation, things like The Knot, they have legal teams that go through these reviews to make sure that there aren't any disputes. I don't know if you just saw this, Andrea Polito. She was the Dallas wedding photographer that just won $1 million defamation lawsuit. Whether or not she gets the money is another story. However, it does set a precedent that you can't have your clients going out there saying crap that just isn't true. On one of the reviews, she said that she spent thousands of dollars. Nope, you only spent $1,500. That's not thousands of dollars. Another thing is, so she went through American Express, went through the chargeback. She won the chargeback and said that she had enough documentation to prove that this client was just trying to get money back. So she was able to take that documentation to The Knot and say, listen, this is crap. This needs to be taken off. And The Knot actually ended up taking it off. It took about 6 weeks to happen, but it happened.
But that's why I think people often react in a snarky way to things like that. Oh, yeah, let's see if she can actually collect $1 million. That's never going to happen. But the important,
it really won't. It really won't.
But the important thing is that it sets a precedent, right? So not only does it set a precedent in law, now it puts pressure on sites like Yelp and The Knot to actually have legal teams to be able to show that they actually do their part and prevent this type of illegal stuff from happening. So it benefits the industry as a whole.
That's the other thing is that it's always best to respond quickly with your client. You clearly don't want a pissed off person, number one. That's not good for business. Number two, you don't want them pissed off enough to feel compelled to write a review. And you also need to make sure that you're ensuring some sort of truth in your advertising, making sure that your client knows exactly what they are getting. And also, if you include things like props or unlimited prints or, you arrive an hour before, whatever it is that you're promising, make sure that all that is lined out. But also line out what happens if you don't. Traditional contracts need to be in favor of both parties. So if you do this, this happens. If you don't do this, this is what the client is entitled to. In my particular contract, I include props with everything. I make sure that I tell them they are standard props. We don't do theme props. We just have, hats, boas, and some sunglasses, and that's what you get, ta-da, on your way. That is included. In my contract, if there is a line item that that I am charging for, and let's say I'm going to do, coastal beachy props, and the day of the event comes, I have charged them $95 to do this. I don't bring them. In my contract, it says that client is entitled to that line item as a refund. If, for example, the attendant doesn't bring props that are just included with whatever package, I have in there that the client is entitled to a $25 refund. Whenever I first started doing photo booths, we were doing, a couple a day, and there was a lot going on in addition to other things. Things happen. You forget your props. The client would come back and say, well, we want a 50% refund. Well, are you really going to do a 50% refund for something as, small as props that really aren't part of a functioning photo booth? So it just protects you and your client as well to know that we all know what we're getting ourselves into.
One of the things I always try to be mindful of is that, people in the industry are at all different levels. Some are just starting out, some are more established and looking to grow. You don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that just because you haven't dealt with an issue, it's not worth dealing with yet. that, right? So the benefit of listening to shows like this or other industry leaders that have experience is that you get to hear in advance of an issue happening what you should be doing. It may be tempting to just say, you know what, it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen, I'm not going to worry about it. But actually, if you put in the systems in place now, not only does it help you scale, like Ryan touched on earlier, it would help make dealing with these issues a lot easier when and if they do occur. It's a mathematical certainty that if you do enough events, these things are going to happen. So you want to be prepared.
Well, and that's the thing is, I'm not saying that anyone go to the lengths that I go to. I take chargebacks very, very seriously, only because that is just, a gateway to, a million other things that can happen. One of the things with chargebacks is that, let's say you are a new photo boother starting out and this does happen because, of one reason or another. You don't need to have all of the crap that I just talked about. I would just take photos on your phone as the event is happening. Take the photo of what the photo booth setup looks like, as a whole, and then part of the event. Those are the really two big photos that you need. And then your signed contract. And generally that's all you're going to need. Anything else? Go ahead.
I really like how all this stuff is kind of connected. And we touch on these things on different episodes, but they all really connect to help build a successful company. So for example, it may seem like you're going overboard tracking all these things, but it's not, because you're already tracking a lot of it in your event report, which is what you use to manage your employees and keep them accountable. So you can kind of build these building blocks in a way where they don't add more work because you're already doing it to run your business the right way. It's not additional brain damage to do these things.
The part of this that I really enjoy is, whenever I do the event report, the event report is there for many reasons. I love copying it, pasting it, putting it into the event, closing it out, and then it's done, moving on to the next. That way, a year from now, I go back, I see what happened with the event. There are times where, we had a specific feature that this particular, so it's just one of those things that keeps you on top of your game. That way, whenever they say, oh, listen, we did this last year, you pull it up. Oh, great. We love the Batman props. Let's do the Batman props again. And, it just gives you, I guess, a little bit more, you're just the expert in this.
And what I'd be curious about is hearing from the listeners. If you've had any experience dealing with chargebacks, if you had any positive or negative experiences or heard any other stories, I'd be curious to hear how those worked out. If you're not in our Facebook group, make sure you join it. You can just search Super Boothers on Facebook, join the group, and join the discussion.
Rant over. Thanks so much for listening today. Just want to remind everyone, tickets to A Night in Gotham are still on sale. It is August 24th in New York City. Tickets are available for $75. Also, we are announcing today Super Boothers do Dallas. We will be in Dallas, Texas, September 25th at the W Dallas Victory. It's going to be an amazing night. Tickets are available online as well, superboothers.com. If you are interested in advertising on Super Boothers, please check out our website at superboothers.com/advertise. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.